All right, guys, welcome to Perspective with Zane Foy. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Gavin. We got a great podcast for you guys, talking a lot about forgiveness and grace in relationships. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. And yeah.
I wanted to talk a bit about your perspective on the challenges that may arise when it comes to business type relationships, but not business relationships. The relationships where the people are involved in business and have very busy lives, and in many cases are pretty. It can be pretty far apart and don't see each other very often.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is always like a super big challenge for me because going into dating, and when I kind of went through my whole finding myself era or whatever, I was very like, I don't know if I could find someone that's like super business oriented, because I always wanted like a really traditional relationship. Like that was kind of just my like preference. I know I was the person always like tuck my head and just like grind. So for me, I feel like I need to find someone that is at least willing to slow down. And I think that's kind of where you have to find the balance, is like, it really depends on what you want. When I know for me, if, getting into a relationship with two, Lindsay's very, very independent, especially when we met. She was very like autonomous, had her own thing going on. Like, she's going to school. She's got her own passions and careers and things she wants to do. And then I've got my own passions and careers and things I want to do. And so this is like a very real conversation we've actually had with each other, which is like, someone's got to give. So either someone's got to give or we both have to give in certain places. Cause we have Liam on the way. So it's like,
The baby.
Yeah. We can't like, okay, I have my job and my passion. She has her job and her passion. And then very soon we're introducing parenthood into the mix, which is going to be way heavier than the job or the passion. So, there's already points where we're like barely struggling too. Because if you think about it, I have to do my job. I have to pursue my passions. And then I have, friendships that I have to somehow try to maintain. I'm someone's son, right? So I have family relationships I have to maintain. I'm someone's brother. So I have brotherhoods I have to maintain. And then on top of all of that, I am a husband that I have to maintain. And then I'm, soon to be a father, which I kind of just consider myself a father already. So like that, the hierarchy of that is super complex. And the ranking is really, really what's important. And I think I'm husband first and then I'm father.
I got a question there. So you mentioned you both are two very independent people. You have your own hobbies, you have your own passions, you have your own different sets of work, and you both seem like very busy people. I mean, I was here just the other day, and your wife came home late, and it's like, yeah, they both have a lot of stuff going on. A lot of independently, a lot of independence there.
Yeah.
And so with such difference between both what you guys care for,
Right.
and what you guys do on a daily basis, how do you make it work?
So we have rules. We have rules. Sundays are like family day. And that kind of came from like, I was reading, as I was reading the Bible, I just read in the book of Leviticus, the Sabbath day. And, he talks about like the seventh day. And I could be wrong. So if there's some crazy Christian guru out there that was like, that was not the book of Leviticus, I don't know, but I know I was close. But I read about the Sabbath day, and that like God says on the seventh day is for rest. The seventh day is for resting, and to be with family. And that was a day to celebrate and like, have celebrations with your family. Like, in a modern day, you might be like a barbecue or like a get together, you got to dinner or whatever it is. And so I thought, well, I think we should do that. Sundays were just the day that worked for us. I'm rarely doing anything. She's rarely doing anything. And if I am doing something, it would be like my coaching calls, with my community, learning to love. And that I switched from weekly to bi-weekly. Like I've been pulling back on everything to slow it down so that when Liam is here, it's not a difficult transition. But yeah, we came up with like an agreement. I think our two biggest things, like Sundays are family days. That's just a given. I don't schedule anything on Sunday. I just plan, like we plan that day for each other. And then the other thing is dinners. I value dinner time together so highly. For me, it's like I don't want the TV on. I don't want none of that. But like I want us to expect every single day to sit down and have dinner together. And if something has come up, if she's working late or I'm working late, or something that we can't control or we need to prioritize, we are very good at communicating that. But we make it a priority. And I think it's very good on both ends. We make it a priority. And so it's a lot of, we know we're going to be away from each other or like we're going to be pulled in our directions, but we have created very strict rules that like, this is us time. This is us time. No phones, no distractions, no work, no nothing. You, me, and that is it.
So it's less of, I think might be for some people less of about like a priority thing. It's more of something to consistently look forward to. It's like everything can be going crazy throughout the week. And however, those Sundays
100%.
Stay consistent.
100%.
It's looking forward to a time that, hey, again, like I said, things can be going crazy, ups and downs and through the entire week. However, at least we can look forward to Sunday.
And we're very good at like, we're quick to call each other out. I think that's something that a lot of couples don't capitalize very well, is that like we communicate all the time, even when it's bad. If something comes up and I feel like we're going to miss dinner or dinner's going to be an hour later than I expected or an hour, like that bothers me. That really bothers me. And I will bring that up instantly. I will be like, hey, I don't feel like you are valuing this as much as I do. You know how important this is to me. Like, what do we need to do? And same, I think on the reverse aspect of that, when it's me and her time and I'm on my phone or I'm working, she's very quick to be like, put your phone down. Yeah. Like, stop. Pay attention to me. Pay attention to us. You need to zone out. And I'm like, shit, you're right. And
you touched on something pretty important there, and that's the resolving conflict quickly, or not even just resolving it, but pointing out that, hey, I didn't like this. Hey, there's a problem here. So what does that whole process for you look like between identifying the problem, communicating the problem, and is that different between man and woman when it comes to finding a solution and moving forward through that?
I think.
What does it look like for both?
It's very, I don't know, just blatant and frank. We're both very direct. And I think we're safe enough, like we're comfortable enough in our relationship to be like, fuck you. I didn't like that. And it'd be like, oh, and it's not like a hurtful thing. But it's just like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And I think it comes from a place of like, you really kill your ego. Because to expect someone to know what to do and you don't communicate, like to expect someone to just treat you right and you're not giving them any sort of guidance or any sort of guidelines or correcting them when they're wrong, because they're gonna be wrong. So to expect them to just figure it out like some blind luck is ridiculous. It's absolutely wild to me. And that's something that it just takes work. But I think for me, if I have a boundary that gets crossed, like I point it out immediately. And we have a very like serious but empathetic conversation, because it has to come from a place of people are good. Evil is good gone wrong. And so, early on in our relationship, I discovered that Lindsay was very dismissive. If a problem got brought up, she would like kind of back off or like run away. And immediately I was like disrespected. I was like, how dare you? Like, you're going to run away from our problems. How are we ever going to make this work? And that was me coming from a very ego driven place of like, I deserve better. But when I put my ego aside, I thought, okay, what has the good gone wrong here? Okay, well, maybe she's had a lot of experiences where staying there and trying to work it out didn't go very well. And so she's developed this defense mechanism that it's better to just run away. It's safer to just run away. And so I actually took a reverse approach and thought, okay, well, instead of letting my ego drive me to approach this in a way of I deserve better, how dare you? Why don't I approach this in a way of, oh no, like, why are you hurting? Or do you feel safe here? And so I came from a place of love. And like, hey, I real like something was done wrong. This relationship is not happy, but I also don't want you to feel like you can't stay here and work it out with me. So it's kind of like a gentle correction, a gentle love of like, I know you mean well, but somewhere we had a miscommunication. Like, let's work that out. And a lot of practicing of forgiveness to kind of show what's supposed to be done. So if she calls me out, I know it's far more productive for me to listen and apologize and validate than to even think about who's right or wrong. Because it's more so establishing the safety in the relationship. We can, once the feelings are taken care of, then we can talk logistics.
So now that you mentioned that, when it comes to, you know, when a woman brings up a problem and they're sad about it, right? What approach as the man should be taken in order to, you know, get to the point where you can move forward, right? There's a bunch of steps in between, her coming to you with a problem and then moving forward.
Yeah. So when Lindsay comes to me with a problem, it's immediately validate, reassure, listen, understand. So, you know, I'll bring it up to like this. And I think more so, I would say just from my experience, more so women are a lot less likely to be direct. They're a lot more hesitant with their feelings than men because their power is feeling. So it's kind of their logic of like, if you can't see I'm in pain, like, what are you doing? And so I pick up and I call out whenever I think something's wrong with Lindsay. Like every time, I'm very quick at it. I'll be like, honey, what's wrong? You're being weird. You're being distant. You're being off. Something feels off to me. Like my spidey senses are tingling. Yeah. And I'll be like, what's wrong? And she'll be like, I'm good. And I'm like, okay, well, you say you're fine, but you don't show you're fine. And so I know something's not right. And I would bring that up a lot. I'd be like, okay, well, you're acting strange though. You're talking strange. You feel strange. Is something going on? And I will keep like prying that like thought.
What are some cues that show you the case that she's not okay? Like what are some cues that
lack of affection, a pattern interrupt? You get used to how someone loves you. And so when that changes or that behavior kind of dwells a little bit, you think, what's wrong? And
how about for the people that find it, for the people that have found it hard to pick up on the cues on, you know, when their woman is not doing well, like how do you go about that?
That's a conversation you should have. That's a self-awareness thing. So it's saying like, hey, I struggle to pick up on when you are and are not okay. Like, how can we work through this? Is this, are there things I need to be looking out for? Or is this something you can communicate with me? Because it's also a two-way road. And there's been times where I miss things with Lindsay. But she's also gotten to the point where she's very reasonable and empathetic in the sense of like, I can't expect my man to just read my mind all the time. And she's been very quick to apologize if she catches herself doing that. Because a lot of it's just trauma driven. It's trauma. It's we learned the incorrect ways to do stuff, and sometimes our feelings are wrong. And if we feel like being dismissive, that doesn't mean it doesn't mean your feeling's not there, but it doesn't mean your feeling is right. Or if I feel like getting defensive, it doesn't mean my feeling's not there, but it also doesn't mean my feeling's right. And so it's having the communication and breaking it down. The best way I can explain it is like, if we need to solve a problem, we start talking about the problem. But then if the talking becomes a problem, I'll teach you how to talk. If you can't talk because you can't breathe, I'll teach you how to breathe. If you can't even, if you can't sit down and pay attention, I can teach you how to sit down and pay attention. You keep breaking it down and then you baby step it all the way to the solution. Okay, so I'll teach you my language first. Okay, then I'll learn your language first. Okay, then we'll learn the disconnect first. And like you break it down. It's not, step 1, problem, step 2, talk about it, step 3, fixed. It's, okay, here's the problem. Okay, but now we're struggling to fix the problem. So what problems do we have in fixing the problem? Like what conversational problems do we have? And breaking it down until, and like the goal, the way you've done it correctly is when both sides are, oh, okay. Like when you feel good, the weight's gone, the questions are gone, you're not curious, you're not concerned. And if we miss something, I'll bring it up. Mm-hmm. Hey, that conversation we had yesterday, I thought of a question I should have asked then. What do you think about this? And we'll talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And that's really what it is. It's just building a habit of communicating everything, even the things we don't know. Saying, hey, I don't know how to say this properly, but this is where my head's at. I don't know how to, speak about this problem, but I feel weird about it. Like stating the literal thoughts you're having to yourself, to your partner.
Mm-hmm. So let's say for some of us out there that are with a reserved partner, a partner that hasn't grown up in the best environment or the most in an environment that has been conducive to expressing how they feel, because either they have been put down or in some way has some trauma that makes them feel like they need a reserve and have some walls built, right? Now, when in a relationship with that kind of person, how could we go about bringing them out of that cave, and how do we go about providing a space where they feel understood and heard? Like, what are some things that what's your perspective on how to develop that over time?
This took a long time. This was one of the, I think, biggest challenges I had with Lindsay, because she was that person. She was very reserved, and there were a lot of times of just, I need you to talk to me. I need you to talk to me. It's okay. And I was very persistent in stating the fact that, like, it's okay for you to talk to me. It's okay for you to say this. It's okay for you to say that. And I would keep like pushing and pushing and pushing that agenda, but coming from a place of love. I was never like, I need you to talk to me. Like, I don't get it. Like, I can't, like, I tried very, very hard not to ever get frustrated. Because then I knew that would immediately throw her back in the shell.
So it's being mindful of your tone as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would be very soft, very gentle. Like, hey, I want you to talk to me. I want to know what's going on. I care about you. I want to know you're okay. I mean, there had been times where we would sit down for like 3, 4, 5 hours. And I would start asking like little caveat questions of like, do you have the words, you just don't know how to say them? Or like I would hold her hand and I'd be like, squeeze my hand once for yes, twice for no. Like, do you not know what to say, or you know what to say, you just don't know how to say it? And like I would break it down to get little points across. And then anytime I felt like a crack or a sliver, like that light was shed out a little bit, maybe she mentioned one tiny little thing, I would be extremely like endearing and appreciative and tell her how much I love and appreciate her opening up to me. And so I still remember the first time she like finally got the courage and the bravery to like, you know what, I'm gonna talk about this. I'm gonna talk about this. We're gonna see what happens. And she let it all out. And I was just like, I just validated the shit out of her. I was like, you're absolutely right. That's my bad. And I ate it. And then I was like, thank you so much for telling me that. And I think for her, it was this big epiphany moment. I remember her face being like, yeah, like, why are you not fighting back? And I'm like, that's because we're not here to fight. We're not here to fight. I'm not here to argue with you. I just want to make sure you feel okay. And then if we have disagreements, we can talk about those. But I want to make sure we're happy first.
So for the men that think their woman is trying to fight them, what mindset can they adapt to realize that that's not the case? And like, what is she actually trying to do?
So she's trying to do anything she can to just convey her emotions. Her emotions go way deeper than words. And the mindset I always put myself in is like, people are good, evil is good gone wrong. And I always think to myself like, okay, Lindsay didn't wake up today going, I can't wait to fight with Zane. Like, I can't wait to argue. I can't wait to blah, blah, blah. And so I have to ask like, okay, I have to not take it personally, right? And that's what I mean by like kill the ego. Because when we feel like someone's attacking our ego, we fight back. But if we don't have an ego...
Fight back or provide excuses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if we can get rid of the ego, well, then all of a sudden we don't take it personally. And instead of, oh, this person's saying hurtful words to me, I almost see it as like a child, crying because they scraped their knee. The adult version of that. You're on the playground, you scraped your knee, you start crying. Now we're grown adults. So what happens? You scrape your heart, you start crying. That's it. And so I just think, okay, well, hold on. Something's not aligning here. And what's crazy is that 9 times out of 10, it's always a miscommunication. Because nobody woke up and said, I can't wait to neglect you. Or I can't wait to abuse you. I can't wait to hurt you.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times it's just a miscommunication, but you have to have grace. You have to have grace. If I, got mad and, hurtful every time our conversations didn't go perfectly, we would never get anywhere. You have to have grace. You have to have an incredible level of forgiveness. Your spouse is going to hurt you and cut you deeper than anyone else on the planet ever will because you're going through life together. Like, life sucks. Life can be this painful, ruthless, terrible place. But you wake up and you learn to go through it together. Oh, you don't know how to breathe? I'll teach you how to breathe. You don't know how to talk? I'll teach you how to talk. You don't know how to love? I'll teach you how to love. And that takes patience. You can't expect someone who doesn't know how to love to just do it right.
So now there, like you say, teach how to love. What do you mean by that? Are you talking about, each person has their own subset of like love languages? And then, how to make the other person feel, loved and appreciated and validated? Or what are you talking about there?
It's everything. It's all of it. Attachment styles, love languages, communication, all of the above. How do we have the most secure relationship possible? How do I need to love you? How do you need to love me? What do we need to do to just keep growing as a couple? And that's what's exciting is I think people go into it thinking, oh, I have to work on my relationship. No, you should go into it thinking, thank God I get to work on my relationship. Like, it's an exciting thing to grow and develop and fall in love with the storyline rather than, people spend way too much of their life thinking, I just want to be happy. Fuck that. Don't live life going, I just want to be happy. I want to live life to be happy. No, live life to be useful. Live life to have a purpose for someone.
I think when you live life by constantly thinking, I want to be happy, then the things that aren't making you happy are going to be everywhere. You're going to think it's going to put more attention on the things that aren't making you happy, opposed to being grateful for the moment and grateful for the opportunity.
Well, also, what a selfish way to live life.
Yeah.
To think, I want to do I'm going to live life to what makes me happy. Well, when you get into a relationship, the most beautiful part about it is, guess what? It's not all about you anymore. So all of a sudden, I'm going to live life to make us happy. And sometimes making us happy means sacrificing my happiness for a moment. Sometimes I don't want to work late. Sometimes I don't want to just tank a conversation, or sometimes I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to work through things.
Yeah.
You know, there's been plenty of moments when we're like, fuck you, no, fuck you. But it's also like, at the end of the day, it's better to be in love than to be right.
So you say like, hey, there are certain things that that I have to give up momentarily or even potentially indefinitely when it comes to being happy, like my own happiness. When communicating that, like what is that what can that conversation look like on compromising things that that each other are doing to make ourselves happy? Like what does that look like?
We've had a couple different conversations of this. I would say it looks different every single time.
What looks different? Just like maybe start.
Yeah, the compromise. It's kind of like, what's the common? I'll say this: the commonality behind it is, what's the goal? If the goal for both of us is to raise a good family, then the compromise always works out. Mm-hmm. But the second we have two separate goals, there's never going to be a compromise. And so, the compromise is, what's going to make my partner happy? How can we get the best of both worlds? How can we both feel like we're getting an equal play out of this? And sometimes perspectives have to change. Sometimes, when we talk about it, I'll have this, in my mind, I think this is equal. And in Lindsay's mind, she thinks something else is equal. I have to really go into that with an open mind and be like, maybe she's right. Maybe she is right. How do we make this work?
And so not just how do we make this work, but what's a good way to go into those conversations, right? Let's say there's something that either the man or the woman is not doing. Like, let's say they're doing something that upsets the other partner, but it does make them happy, right? Yeah. How does the conversation look like when, like, on how to find a solution that works for both of them? Like, how does that compromise conversation go? Because sometimes when a partner has an issue that, hey, you're doing something that you're doing something that I don't like, and they like hash you for it. However, it's something that you enjoy. Mm-hmm. So from both parties, one might seem like they're attacking. Let's say they're attacking me, and I'm like, oh no, I really like this. Why would I change? Like, and then it's defense. But how do you go about that conversation between, oh, there's this what seems like an attack, and oh, I'm going to start going into defense mode? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah. I'll give you an example. In our situation right now, I think the most recent conversation we've had is, Lindsay's studying for, cosmetology, and she wants to do beauty and all this stuff, but she also wants to go back to teaching because that was something she was really passionate about. I have my, corporate job, and then I have my relationship coaching as like my side hustle or my passion or whatever. And so we're very, very busy. Obviously, with Liam on the way, we have to drop some things. And so we had to sit down and have a conversation of how we're going to do this. And it was literally just like that. We sat down, and I think I opened with like, hey, honey, I really want to talk. Like, I just want to figure out what we're going to do with Liam, because I'm concerned who's going to do what. And I really want to make sure this is a super smooth transition. And I want to make sure, like, what we're about to go through, we're both happy. And so I immediately established what my goal was. And so my thing was like, I am supporting us right now. Financially, I am doing a lot of the heavy lifting. That being said, I was very clear to be like, I don't want you to have to give up on your dreams and have to give up on your passions and give up on those things. But if we get spread thin and one of us has to drop our jobs and our dreams and our passions or whatever it is, like, let's just talk about the options. If I drop my stuff, what are we going to do? And that's just a real conversation. I'm not being brutal. I'm not being harsh. Just your financial situation would not suffice our life right now. That being said, I don't want you to have to get rid of your stuff. So and she's very reasonable. She's like, no, that makes a lot of sense. But I go, okay, what can we do? How can we balance this so that I can continue to provide for the family? You can continue doing your thing, and we both can be happy for Liam. And, she's come at me saying well, what are we going to do when you're working all the time and you're doing this and you're doing that and you're blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And those things do make me happy, but not happier than my family, not happier than spending time with my wife. And I'm not going to pick something over her. What's the purpose? I didn't get married to her thinking I'm only going to be with you for as long as it serves me. No, I'm with her because we're serving a greater purpose that's bigger than both of us, right? We're serving our child. We're serving God. We formed a covenant. And so I think it's a play on, I understand what your passions are. And I want you to know, I'll keep reiterating that I do respect that. And I do love those things. Because I want her to know that I'm not just discrediting anything. And then we work through it and we genuinely come up with options. And you just keep deciding different things until both parties feel comfortable with the decision that is made, because her mind in that conversation comes from, I don't want to lose who I am. In my mind, the conversation comes from, I want to make sure everyone's taken care of. And so that's the problem, right? That's the actual conversation, is how do we make sure you can continue to do what you want to do while I can continue to make sure everyone's going to be okay.
So let's say both parties have an agreed goal, an agreed future lifestyle or check mark, or whether it's kids or house or a certain type of lifestyle, some kind of common goals, right? Let's say, there's a handful of them and they're set on those goals. However, when one side makes a mistake that isn't in line with those goals, and it severely irritates the other party to the point where they start doubting if this person actually values the same thing as they do, right? How can the couple navigate through that mistake and both validate and communicate that, yes, this was a mistake. However, the goals between us are still the same.
It's grace, forgiveness. Because it's also we've had moments like that all the time where I might get upset at Lindsay because I'm like, hey, this is, just like you said, this is outside of our scope of, what we want for each other. What are we doing? But it's also, I have to be able to say here, I'll give you another shot, or hey, forgiveness, I forgive you. And we move on. Because also, to not forgive someone, you're going to be perfect yourself. Part of the reason I forgive is because, one, my God tells me I have to. And so, whatever he says, I do.
And you're not perfect.
And two, to think I'm going to go down the next 80 years of our life with this perfect track record is fucking insane. I'm going to fuck up at some point. If I haven't already, I'm sure I have a million times. And she has the grace. She has enough grace for me. I mess up all the time. And she goes, you know what? But you're getting better and I'm proud of you. You're improving. And that's it. if you have someone that says they're going to get better and they actually get better, you've won.
Now, what about this? When someone brings up these problems, right, and you say, I have improved, I have, and you honestly went through the motions to be able to fix and alter and realign yourself with those common goals. However, when there isn't a situation, or when the situation, when there hasn't been a situation that proved that you have done your, let me redo that. I almost clicked it. Remind me what I said.
When you haven't had a situation.
Okay. So let's say at one point someone fucked up. Someone did something that isn't in line with the future goals that the couple had together and were set on working towards, right? And let's say the person that messed up, they took an honest look at themselves and genuinely took care of the problem. They spent time on it, they meditated on it, and then took action and improved themselves, right? What happens when the other partner, hasn't seen the opportunity for that person to prove that they've improved? Like, what am I trying to say?
I think I kind of get where you're coming from. I mean, it's
maybe I don't know.
It's little things.
Like readjust that question.
Well, I've dealt with this problem in the past. Like we talk about trust. We talk about trust, and somebody did something big to break trust. Maybe they said they'd be home at 10 and they didn't get home till 12:30 or something like that. And the partner's like, hey, like, I was trusting you to follow your word. And so now there's this big rift, right? But the partner hasn't gone out in so long. So how can they possibly know that, the next time they go out, they're going to actually do it? One, the little things help. If you can be a man on your word for the little things, you'll sure as shit be a man of your word on the big things, right? If I tell Lindsay, hey, I'm going to do the cat boxes today, I do the cat boxes. If I say, we're going to get the groceries, we get the groceries. I'm getting this done. I'm getting that done. The little things add up, right? It's not, when we look at trust, there's a million different ways we can establish trust. And then when the big situations happen again, you give your partner grace. Because what's the alternative, right? The alternative is that you just don't trust them for the rest of your life. Eventually you move on, you find someone else, and then that person's going to fuck up. You're going to keep going down this pattern, realizing people, guess what? They're not perfect. And at some point you have to accept the fact that they're not perfect. The line is, at what point is the trust that's broken too much to come back from? And that's when we talk about, infidelity, lying about finances. Those are like the big things you'll see in terror relationship. Yep. Yeah. Abuse and cheating. Those are things like you really can't come back from, right? Because now we're in a dangerous scenario. Now we're in something that becomes almost too destructive. But if someone hasn't crossed that line, you figure it out every single time. I think of it like this. A lot of people go through life with this insecurity of like, oh, what if they're going to cheat on me? What if they're going to cheat on me? Okay, well, they're not until they are. So if someone hasn't betrayed you, stop treating them like they already have.
Worry when you have to worry.
Exactly. You have to move on, because also, what a terrible way to live life. To deny, you have to focus on the positive shit. If I obsess over every mistake Lindsay has ever made, I am never going to actually recognize the growth she's seeing. If I told you right now, look in the room and point out every single thing that's brown, and I said, okay, how many things did you see that were brown? You just throw a number out there.
10.
Okay, and I said, okay, now, without looking around the room, how many things were turquoise? You have no idea because you weren't looking for it.
Yeah.
So you go into a relationship looking for the improvement, looking for the progress, because I'm not going to walk around my relationship waiting to slap Lindsay on the wrist. I would rather walk around my relationship waiting to say, good fucking job. I'm proud of you for that. Thank you.
And it
I want to
reinforces the good behavior and gives them
Yeah.
a safe space to be able to be like, cool, okay, at least I know that I am improving for you and for us, instead of you constantly looking and pointing out all the things I'm doing wrong.
And that's something you learn about when you study attachment styles and people that are like dismissive avoidant is that they have this constant fear of I'm never going to be good enough for my partner. So if you don't praise them, if you don't reinforce you're getting better, you're improving, well then they're just going to feel shameful and they're going to like run from the relationship. You praise someone into progress. It works every single time. Every time me and Lindsay have both had to fix something, praising each other into progress has been the most beautiful way to go about it, because it's like every time I do better, I feel better, and we have a deeper type of love. There's literally nothing negative about that entire process. The hardest part is just the initial forgiveness. To just say, oh, well, we're going to try again. Well, we're just going to have to try again tomorrow. We'll try again tomorrow. And then you got a timeline. And, it's... I've always thought, before Lindsay, I always thought people never change. And I've actually, redacted that statement in the sense that people do change, but the ones that do it quickly. And so if I see something I don't appreciate, Lindsay, immediate correction.
So I want to point on that. I think it's unfair to say that without, or that is fair to say under the assumption that the communication styles are aligned.
Yes.
And there is a mutual safe space and understanding between the two people at all times that, hey, and an understanding that there is grace. It's like, hey, it's like if someone or if the other partner understood, hey, if you do mess up, I'm still going to love you and I'm still going to fight for this relationship. And then I believe that understanding, that mutual agreement, that mutual value between the two people provides the space to be able to, be able to mess up. Be able to improve and find solutions and not have it be such a pivotal negative moment. And that negative moment can be turned into a positive one under the assumption and under the same foundation that, hey, we're going to work this through. I love you and I will give you grace, and that unconditional love. Until, like you said, some of those major issues like infidelity, abuse, and cheating, like those are the things that might not be able to recover from.
Yeah.
Like those are real fundamental. Absolutely not. This is a sign that this is not going to work out between us. And you have some work to do on yourself with someone else, right? However, outside of that, and under the principle of I love you, we're going to work this through no matter what issue it is, day by day and every day, and choose that every day. I think that's how you set a relationship up for success. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest things for me was learning, to base my relationship on a lot of principles of God. And I was not religious at all prior to Lindsay. I was the polar opposite. In fact, my nickname was Lucy because people would call me like Lucifer. Like I would act like I was like the devil child when we'd go out and whatever. Like I was always the bad influence. And then, I started turning to faith and basing my relationship off faith. And, we don't just make a promise to each other. We make a promise to God. And the more I cherish that promise and the more I try to love in the way he does, which is unconditional, an infinite amount of forgiveness, the better my life gets, to be honest. It's just the better it gets, the deeper that me and Lindsay's connection gets. It's one thing to have a relationship where you never fight, but it's another thing to have a relationship where you do fight and yet you get through it. I almost feel like couples that do, weather the storm every now and then, but make it through the other side have a deeper connection, because it's not just I love you when things are going right, but I also know that we're going to love each other when things are going wrong.
So do you believe that it's important for couples to fight and to fight it out? Because I know at least in my experience, there's, I've had a partner where we didn't really fight very often. Mm-hmm. And like really it's hard to even recollect a memory of that. However, with that, when something like when one of the partners does decide to fight, it's like all hell lets loose. Mm-hmm. Like both parties are like freaking out and don't know what to do, right? Because they haven't, because there hasn't really been like fights really haven't happened. And I think being in a space and mutually agreeing that, I won't leave, let's fight this out.
I think there's a sense of honesty that needs to come from that, because obviously you shouldn't be like seeking out problems.
Of course.
But it's like, why are you not fighting? Are you not fighting because you're actually good? Or are you not fighting because you're just not willing to talk about it?
And avoiding it.
And that's probably why it comes off like off the top rope.
And what are some problems that could arise from that, like building up?
Literally, just like you said, it becomes absolutely destructive. You have all these, built up emotions that instead of working on them out as they happen, which is like the healthy way to do it, you wait until they bottle up, and then the emotions get so strong that you do something wild. You do something crazy. You do something you'll probably regret. Something Lindsay said to me a lot, because I had this problem where I would bottle up my emotions, and I would come off the top rope. And she's like, dude, like, what do you, like, you're throwing all of this stuff at me now, and you're mad at me when, she's like, have you even given me a chance to improve? This is the first time I'm hearing about this. Like, what do you expect? And I'm like, you're right, actually. And so something she told me is actually something we both have worked on. That's been like I think a common season for us right now is talk early, express your feelings early.
Talk early, talk often. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I had something on my mind. I'm trying to remember what it was. When a traumatic, like when an event happens that is traumatic for both parties, and it is just such a bad time, how do you, in that moment, how do you communicate that, like, in those moments, and how do you support each other in those moments? Sorry, that's not my question. When shit hits the fan, and that's going to happen with every single couple and everyone in life. Mm-hmm. And let's say one of the partners didn't show up in the ways that they needed to, right? Either it wasn't really communicated, or that partner just didn't do what they needed to. Let's say after that, both people recognize that, hey, something wasn't right. One of us needed to do X in this situation, but it didn't happen. When one of the parties thinks that, hey, we've talked about this and we found a solution and we're going to move forward, what happens when all of a sudden down the line that partner brings up that situation again, as if like, and then it surprises the other, let's say the guy, like, hey, I thought we worked through this. I thought, like, I've taken time to like improve on these certain things. Why is this being brought up again? Or why is this being brought up in a new light all of a sudden, right? How do you go about those kind of situations, like where it feels like they're keeping tallies, even though you're under the impression that you improved and that you guys agreed to improve, and most importantly, moved on. So I know that's a little bit of a complex,
you're
but if
good.
you can like restate
Yeah.
what that is and then like answer.
So, one, this is being brought up because I think that situation probably never actually ever felt resolved. And that's on you to be aware of that and to keep talking about it. And I had this situation with Lindsay where there was something I kept bringing up, and I think I brought it up like 3 or 4 times over the course of like a few months. And I kept bringing it up because the more I thought about it, the more, so there was something that we kept bringing up like over and over and over again, or I kept bringing it up. And one, it was because every time I relive this situation, I would think of a new perspective, or we would talk about it, whatever. And we would keep talking about it. And she was very good at this. We would keep talking about it until it got resolved. And then it got to a point where, she was like, okay, we've talked about this so many times. At some point you have to forgive me and let us move on, which is very true. Because I'm like, okay, it is not fair for me to keep bringing this thing up, because then she's going to feel like she can't escape it. She's going to be like, wow, every time I make a mistake, I'm going to get penalized for everything I've ever done wrong. And like, you forgive, you forget, you flood. And I think this was a lesson by Tony Robbins, where he says you have to learn how to forgive someone, forget what happened, and then flood the relationship with love. Forgive, forget, flood. And that takes practice. It takes practice. And sometimes we get emotional and we use those situations to describe how we're feeling now. Mm-hmm. It might not actually make sense or correlate to what's going on now, but we use the situation to capture or embody the emotions we're going through because it's similar to what we're feeling. That memory brings up the same emotions we might be feeling right now. But to hold it against someone
and over their head,
and to hold it over their head, it's painful. You have to think, would I want my partner to do that to me? I'm like, no, absolutely not. I have demons I'm trying to escape. You think I want Lindsay holding that over my head? Hell no. So by the same token, does she want me holding things over her head? No, absolutely not. So you don't. You forgive.
In those situations where that is true, where things are being counted up kind of like tallies, mm-hmm. and they are over your head, how does one of the parties address that? And how do they move through that? Because obviously there's built up resentment either mm-hmm. through some kind of avoidance tactic mm-hmm. or some kind of a avoidance trauma-based behavior. Mm-hmm. And then how do you guys move through that? Because that can be very, very detrimental down the road and even make one of the parties leave on unjust and unfinished terms.
I think the best way to go through it is the way Lindsay went through it with me. And she was like, hey, we can't move on if you keep bringing this up. She was just very direct. She was like, we can't move on if this is something you can't forgive me for and like improve. She's like, I'm trying to move out of this. I don't want this to be a discussion anymore. I don't want this to be something we think about anymore. She was very, very blunt and just, I really want this relationship to move on from this because I cannot fully escape if you do not let go. She's like, I am trying to let go. You are not letting go. And she was like, I need you to understand that. And she was right. She was there was no way to convince me or persuade me or trick me. I just had to, she said that to me and I had to get it. Mm-hmm. I had to understand it. I had to be able to speak that language. I had to have the empathy and the grace to move on. And I didn't learn that from her. I mean, a little bit. She set examples here and there, but the grace and the empathy that came from God. That came from reading the Bible. That came from studying my faith.
In deep reflection.
Yeah, it's right. But also, she was very, like, this is what we did for each other. She was open to talk about it for as long as I needed until I felt it was resolved. She was good about that. But she was very good and clear at saying this needs to get resolved soon. And the common goal was we both want to move on. I didn't want to think about it either. I wanted to move on too. I just felt like I couldn't because I had unresolved feelings. And eventually it was like, yeah, okay, it's time to close this book. Is this really the hill I want to die on? No, not at all. And so we moved on. And I took a lot of time being the person that got hurt. I took a lot of time in that mindset of people are good, evil is good gone wrong. And I actually remember I spent a lot of time really deeply trying to get to know Lindsay, not just from her perspective, but from her parents, from her sisters, from her family. I wanted to know who Lindsay is in everyone's eyes. And when that happened, I discovered that all these things that had originally hurt me because I was playing them from my perspective, which is valid. I'm not saying I was wrong. But when I looked at the situation from her perspective, it also made a lot of sense. And she wasn't really doing anything wrong. She was just unfamiliar with the territory or unfamiliar with the situation. And so there was also grace in that too, of like, oh, so she didn't just like wake up and go, we're going to hurt Zane today. It was an honest mistake. It was an honest accident because she had never been properly trained or prepared to handle the situation that had happened. And so how dare me to go into that situation and go, you deserve to get punished because you got it wrong the first chance you had. Well, like, that's not fair. It's not fair at all. We live and we learn. And, I always teach that, like, people need two things for a long-term relationship to work out. And that is the willingness to learn and the willingness to take action. And that needs to come from both sides. But it's not they need to be perfect. They need to get it right the first time. No, do you have the grace to let your partner fail 100 times? Because they will. They will fail 100 times. If they refuse to learn and they refuse to take action, now you have a problem. But if they are learning and they are taking action and they are still failing, that's what happens when we do things we don't know how to do. We don't get it right the first time.
Mm-hmm. So now, when it comes to, let's say a partner is having a hard time trusting that their partner, let's say a partner is having a hard time trusting that their counterpart will be there for them when times get hard. And how do you go about gaining that trust? How do you go about repairing that wound and potentially moving forward?
The little things, being a man of your word on the little things. You're trying to counter the history of failed promises with a history of good promises. If I have 3 mistakes out of 100, I'm a trustworthy person. If I have 3 mistakes out of 5, I'm an untrusty person. But it has to come from like a perspective of you have to pay attention to all the little things.
Like, I'm not talking about just like you have to be this kind of person. Let's say you weren't necessarily the most consistent with your word, or you aren't the most detailed and things do change, but you don't communicate that, so it seems untrustworthy with following through. Now, let's say that's something you want to change. Let's say you want to make your partner feel like they can trust you and they can rely on you and depend on you. Mm-hmm. What are some actions for those out there that are in that situation where they recognize, damn, this is something I got to improve. Mm-hmm. I need to become trustworthy. I need to become consistent. I need to become dependable because that's what my partner needs. especially from the man, like big time. And so what does that process look like?
You
Like,
say you ask, how can I be more consistent and more dependable? What does that look like to me? What does that look like to my partner? Ask your partner, what does that look like to you? And then whatever ideas and whatever action items you come up with, you do them, so that your partner has a track record of going, you know what, you did exactly what you said you were going to do. You did exactly what you said you were going to do every single day.
and tried. However, there's still going to be mess ups, especially if that's a behavior, right? And there still has to be grace in there.
Yes.
Like, what are your? I mean, that's at least.
I mean, there has to be grace and there has to be improvement, and you have to hope and pray that you're with someone whose level of grace matches your level of improvement. At the end of the day, like you can only get better. Simply put, you can only get better. You have to hope you're with someone that'll give you the opportunity to do so.
And the patience.
And the hard part is, and like I said, it's something you fix immediately. And you do get better at it. And then you also think, is this really something that needs to be perfect, or is this something I can accept? Is this a them problem, or is this actually a me problem? And maybe my standards are too high. I've had to pull back on my standards a little bit, because I got to a point where I was like, oh, I'm a little too much. I'm expecting too much for someone to possibly navigate.
So what are some things that can come up that would show one of the partners that, hey, maybe my bar is set a little unrealistically high. Like, I want this fantasy version of a person, the super idealistic person, and I use that as a standard. Like, what are some things that can come up with when one of the partners is doing that?
Like, if their standards are too high?
Yeah. How does that affect the other partner?
One for me was, I would have moments where I expected Lindsay to be in her feminine and be this like vibrant, spontaneous person. But then the very next moment, I'd expect her to be stern and like know her shit.
But my question is, if one of the partners is doing that, if one of the partners has a very high standard or a very like an overly idealist, or sorry, if one of the partners has a unrealistic standard of the kind of person that they want, right, and they are with someone, what kind of issues can manifest as a result of that between the two of them?
You saying like how you would bring it up?
Well, first, what are some problems that can arise from one of the partners having unrealistic standards?
Expectation? The other person feels like they're going to fail anyways, so they just don't try. That's what Lindsay did. My expectations were way too high, and she was like, well, shit, no matter what I do, I'm losing. And so, like, what's the point? And that's where we had to, like, sit down, and I had to be like, hey, I think I'm doing too much. And she was like, yeah, like, we need to find, like, some freedom here. And we actually did a couples exercise where we both picked areas to focus. We did masculine and feminine energy. We did an exercise on, all the different character traits that we need to work on. And funny enough, she had to, I think hers was, I wanted her to work on her nurturance and care. And then she asked me to work on a feminine trait, actually. She was like, hey, you're 2 in your masculine. She told me to focus on my flow and flexibility. She was like, you're too, like, she's like, if things don't go your way, you lose your mind. And I was like, that's fair. That's fair. And so that was my focus, was my flow and flexibility. And that's something that I've actually worked on quite well. And then the nurturance and care, she worked on quite well. And so we just picked like one thing at a time to work on. And if it ever got to that point where it was like, you're expecting too much of me, you would just throw the problem back onto your partner. And so if I was like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z from you, and in her mind, she's thinking this is unrealistic, she would go, and how do you expect me to do that? And like a very real question, like what does that look like to you? How would you do that? And then now you have to answer your own question, right? And so if you have unrealistic expectations, then you probably won't be able to answer your own question. And that's where things can get very, very real. As you know, at one point she was like, how can you expect me to be this person and then that person the next? And I'm like, okay, well, like maybe you need to understand this, this, and this. And she's like, well, what are my cues? What am I looking for? What am I reading to dictate who I'm supposed to be? And then I'd have to be like, okay, well, shit, you know. And then I'm like, okay, you're right. This is going nowhere. Maybe I'm being a little insane. And then it no longer becomes something she has to fix. Now it's something I have to fix. Where I'm like, oh, okay. Well, then what's the compromise here?
So you actually bring something up that's pretty interesting, and that's taking a look at those expectations and those maybe even, wants and needs in a partner and comparing them to both the reality and the situation they're in.
Mm-hmm.
So I know for long distance, there are some needs that can't be fulfilled during the long distance portion of those relationships. And it's really interesting you say that, because let's say there's one person that, wants that loves acts of service and loves quality time, right? And let's say those two are really their, like some of their main love languages, main ways that they feel cared for and valued. However, in a long distance relationship, parts of that can't happen in the fullest form, and that person subsequently isn't going to feel as fulfilled as they will at the end of the goal, which is to be in person. So it's just interesting you say that, because it shows the importance of doing a reality check and doing a check on your own standards regardless of your situation. And that's something that I'll take on for sure.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all we got for you guys on the episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Gavin, any last words? Feel free to talk about, yourself, whatever you want to tell them.
Of course. I mean, thank you, Zane. It was such a fun time talking to you, and just, you have such an incredible amount of wisdom, and I've just been honored.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
To ask a few questions about your perspective on, even some things that are going on in my life, as well as some very valuable points that can be applicable to you.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Deuces.